is pure color? I'm trying to film this video and I need the books. Where are the books? No, I gave all of them to people. Can I get to work, please? I'm wearing a coat because it's freezing in here. Hello. It is time to wrap up the year in reading. It's always the most stressful video to do, but I'm gonna just not take this too seriously or with too much weight, and I'm just gonna tell you about my favorite books for 2022. I read a total of 60 books. My reading goal was 50 books, and I surpassed it, so I'm really, really proud of myself. And I think last year I read something like 30 books, so I doubled it. Not about numbers, it's about books, just reading things that you like and not reading things that you don't like. Out of 60 books, I managed to narrow it down to about 16. Now, as I look at this, I feel like there are some books that are sort of honorable mentions. I don't think I could put them in order, but I do think that I can tell you my favorite book, but we'll leave that for the end. Okay, so let's roll it way back to the beginning of the year. This was the first book that I read. And when I read it, I thought, what a fucking great way to open the reading year. And it will be hard to top that one for me. And it was Motherhood by Sheila Heti. I will tell you now, I have 3 Sheila Hetis on this list and 2 Maggie Nelson. I loved this book so much. It is Sheila Heti writing an auto-fictional novel where the main character is questioning if she wants to be a mother. And I found it so powerful. Of course, it was a really long time since I read it, and since I read a lot of these, so maybe I'll be rusty on details. But I tried to pick from books that stayed with me at least in a feeling. This book is like flipping coins, asking a lot of questions, not having all the answers, about the intersection between motherhood and making art. And can art serve as a kind of creation that holds a similar weight to creating a child? I love this. I think this is my favorite Heti. We move on in time. I think I'm going in order kind of when I read them, but I'm wondering if this is an honorable mention. But I do talk about it with people a lot. So I read this year for the first time My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh, and I really loved it. I just wow, oh my God. A flock of birds flying in a really beautiful pattern outside my window. Ohad and I, my partner, Ohad, if you're meeting me for the first time here, we both read this book together and we just talk about it until this day. It was just such an enjoyable reading experience. I think Ottessa Moshfegh is really brilliant in this book, and it's about a young girl in her 20s who is really wealthy. She inherited a lot of money from her parents. She lives in the Upper East Side of New York. She doesn't work, and she's depressed, and she wants to reset her life by taking sleeping pills for 1 year, basically sleeping for a year, hibernating. And it is a lot about also pharmaceuticals, how easily it is to become an overly medicated person in the United States of America. Yeah, she's a terribly unlikable character, but I just loved it. I loved the funny, ridiculous contemporary art world references. She hyperbolizes a lot of things in that book. And it was just great. I just really, really loved it. Then we have this one, which I loved so much this year, and it made me cry. Jenny Awful, Department of Speculation. They used to be young, brave, and giddy with hopes for their future. They married, had a child, and skated through the small calamities of family life, but then slowly, quietly, something changed. Classic Jenny Offo, fragmentary prose, which I like. I have so many dog ears in here, underlines. This is about a marriage falling apart, and I just fell apart in pieces with this book, with her words. It's really funny, it's surprising. She does humor and depth really well together. Hits you in the heart because she can make you laugh and cry. And it's really smart and poetic. I just thought it was really beautiful. So Department of Speculation, this rocked my world. It's up there with the top 5, I would think. Next, Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. It was a reread for me. It's beautiful. It is beautiful, okay? Anne Carson is a poet. She is writing some of the most evocative, gorgeous sentences, and she is retelling in her own way elements of Greek myth because she translates Greek classics for a living, as well as writing her own books. We're following a little red dragon creature named Geryon from the Hercules myth, and he's probably my favorite fictional character in literature ever. I think he is. I just want to adopt him. It's a beautiful, like, coming of age story through beautiful poetry and just incredible imagery. Fantastical, but not in a way that if you're someone who like craves realism, I think that you would still really, hi Booba, you would still really enjoy it. Like a top author for me, one of those people that whenever I'm in a used bookstore, the first person I look for is Anne Carson. Sigrid Nunez, The Friend. Ooh, this book also made me cry. I think if a book made me cry, and not cry from how badly it's written, then it's going on this list. We're following a character who is given a big Great Dane dog after her friend passes away, and he leaves instructions with her that she needs to take care of this dog. I think his name is Apollo. Just the sweetest dog ever in a book, probably. It's really beautiful, like on grief, on friendship, and she doesn't want this dog at first, and she has like so many issues with like having a dog in her apartment. She's gonna get evicted. He's a fucking Great Dane, so actually he's a horse in her house. Relationship that builds between her and Apollo, and just also, if you like books and you like reading, so she is talking about a lot of other writers and a lot of books, and it's meta-fictional because she's writing something as the story goes on. It's just really, really beautiful. With all of these, I feel like if you want more information, you can Google or go to some of my older videos. But I recommend that book wholeheartedly to anyone. There's no one that I would think twice about giving this to them. I cried in the end, and it's also really smart and also has humor. I like books that speak about grief and have humor in them. Sigrid Nunez, Chef's Kiss, also really at the top of the list. I'm throwing in a little honorable mention as well. This is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Many people have already read this book, and a few of my booktube friends on here, I'm sure you saw, met together with Jalen and talked about their experience of reading this. Most of them, it was a reread. I just had the best time reading this book. It's really plotty. Also, a lot of character building. Donna Tartt, you know, it's a thick one, so we're getting a lot of information about the people in this story, and that was really fun. On the first page, you know that one of the main characters is dead or that they murdered him, and then you kind of go back in time up until that point and you find out what happened. And it's about these pretentious young people in a New England college who are studying ancient Greek, and they become a little like academic cult. I just had a lot of fun, and it was really gripping. It was really compelling. I listened to Donna Tartt read it on the audiobook. Okay, the next book is another Sheila Heti. At the time of reading this book, I felt like I was disappointed, or it lost me its pure color. This girl named Mira, Sheila Heti has like imagined a world where God has created the first version of the world, and now he's kind of criticizing it and preparing for a second version of the world. And people are divided into like fish, bears, and birds. And we follow Mira, who has lost her father. So it's really a book about grief. Very singular, interesting, up until the point in the middle where I got a little bit lost. I was reading it in a hotel room, and I felt like a physical, visceral reaction to it. I love the concept of it, and that it's sort of like a biblical story. And then I like wasn't sure about the middle section, and I kind of was like, meh. Okay, I didn't like it as much as I thought. And then Ohad, my partner, read it, and we just kept talking about it. And I kept thinking about the book, and then I keep thinking about it even until now. And it just really stays with me. So I think that holds weight in my list of favorite books of the year. It's a book that doesn't leave me. And the more that I think about it, and as Ohad was reading it and we were talking about it, I was remembering how brilliant it is. A History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt. This was given to me by Sophie, Biblio Sophie. A collection of essays by Billy Ray Belcourt. He's from the Driftpile Cree Nation. He's Indigenous, queer, Canadian, and he is brilliant and poetically such a beautiful writer. These are his essays about being an Indigenous person, about being a queer man, and the intersection of those two identities. Lots of highlighting I did in this book, and it reminds me of Maggie Nelson in the sense that he is citing a lot of other thinkers and a lot of other philosophers, writers, queer and feminist theory, Indigenous theory. Yeah, I think that this was really a wow. Like, I finished reading that and I think I just said in a video at the time, like, you need to read this book, just read this book. And I love the whole element of like living a life that is endangered all the time. And there's so much poverty and violence and just the horrible effects of colonization. He's really pushing for that the ultimate act of resistance in this world is happiness. To be a person that lives in that body and to own your joy and your happiness, and that being like your resistance. And I think that is just so beautiful and inspiring. So loved that. Then we have Indelicacy by Amina Kane. Rebecca gave me this book when I was in New Haven. I gave this book to a friend of mine to read. I don't know what I liked about this book so much, but I loved it. It's about this woman who starts working as a cleaner in a museum, and she really wants to be a writer, and she really loves looking at art, looking at paintings, writing about what she sees. There's a lot of descriptive writing of art, and she's kind of imagining a life outside of being a cleaner and having time to write. And she thinks that the way that she could do it, and kind of what happens in her trajectory of life, is she marries a really, really wealthy man who says, I don't want you to work. You can just be in this big house and take on this new upper echelon in life. And she uses it to take time to write, but she also feels really awkward. Now she has a cleaner in her house. She was a cleaner. She feels uncomfortable with the kind of switch, like huge switch in class that she has and all this privilege that she gets. Just some really beautiful, dark, wintry vibes. A lot of, I just liked it a lot. Like, I don't know, it was just very quiet and simple, and I was totally sucked into it. So I don't know really why, but I like Amina Kane, and I like whatever she was doing in that book. Sorry, this video is long. Now we have another kind of honorable mention, because I wasn't sure, although it's a reading experience that I remember really distinctly this year, and that was another Sheila Heti book called How Should a Person Be? People are most divided over, maybe Pure Color also, but most people I know, and I'm thinking of one, my sister Ignacia, Literary Iggy, she hated this book with a passion. And when I told her, you know, I'm putting together my list of 2022 reads, and I think that What If How Should a Person Be is on my favorites, and she was like, I will riot. So riot, bitch, love you. How Should a Person Be follows like this young writer named Sheila and her best friend, who's Margot, I think is her name, who's a painter, and that's based, we assume, on Sheila Heti herself and her actual best friend in life, Margot, who's a painter. Autofiction for sure, and it's this main character, Sheila, is obsessed with the question, how should a person be? How am I supposed to build my identity in the world? And she constantly looks at other people in life, and the people that she are either friends of hers or artists that she looks up to, or even she doesn't really look up to them, but they're very successful, looks for examples in life of how to be. Like, if I am this way, I'll be successful. If I'm this way, I'll be happy. If I'm this way, I'll create really good art. What is good art? What is bad art? They like throw this competition between a few friends of hers if they can create the ugliest, worst painting. And so there's just like a lot of commentary on art school. And I just thought it was really funny and wild. Like, this book is wild. She writes some crazy shit there about this guy that she's having sex with, and he's like super intense and sends her like crazy emails. Just like goes for it in this book. And I had a really fun reading it, and I also felt like at times it a bit like was coming for me as a young artist. I was like, oh my God, how should a person be? Like, I feel like this is too close to me. I really liked it. I'm losing light, so let's hurry up. Okay, last honorable mention before I talk to you about like my top books, okay? Like, these are like the top. Last honorable mention would be The Last Supper by Rachel Cusk. Doggy ate the back cover and the spine. This is Rachel Cusk's travel memoir of 3 months in Italy with her 2 daughters and her husband. I just spoke about this in a recent vlog. I just loved it. I could not put it down. Travel memoir, which I love, like a book when you're like on the road. Like, I love that kind of thing. And I love Rachel Cusk. She's one of my favorite authors. And I love Italy. My parents live in Italy, so I'm there a lot. So to see this, like, places that I've actually been through Rachel's eyes and language was really wonderful. And also, it's like an art history class, sort of, with her. She's talking a lot about art, famous Italian artists in history. Sometimes my brain can shut off when it comes to historical facts. But when she's doing it, I was like, I'm your straight A student. Okay, top. The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt. This was so surprising to me. This is in the storybook series of New Directions. So it's really slim, really slim, like smaller than a novella even. And it reads kind of like a storybook for adults. A strange little story about this girl who has parents that are really wealthy. And she's like living between Paris and Morocco. And I really don't want to tell you a lot about this story because in a short amount of time, it manages to do plot really well, and it flips the story on you. There's a twist. It's just about like a really smart, young character who is just kind of outsmarting everyone around her. And I guess that's like a theme in some of Helen DeWitt's writing. So I look forward to reading more of hers. I really won't tell you a lot. You should just read it. It's really short. You can read it in an afternoon. It made me laugh. I imagined it as like a monologue, like with a great actress doing it. I don't know. I loved this book. Hold please while we set up a better lighting source. Not ideal lighting, but whatever. Okay, next up in the top, Jeanette Winterson, Sexing the Cherry. This was my first Jeanette Winterson. I just made some videos about this. One vlog, which I think is called like Jeanette Winterson Blew My Mind. And this she did. She is such a smart lady. And she does like so much in this book. It's like a weird little unconventional historical novel. Mother and son story. It's like very feminist, very queer, very erotic and sensual in a lot of the points of this book. It's very whimsical and it's unlike anything that I've ever read. So much fun to read this. It's a lot about time, and there's the life that you live now, but then like in your imagination, you could live other lives. You could be other people. And the power of imagination and how memory can slide on a scale of time, like backwards and forwards. Bless you. Her sentences are delicious. Her words are really full of, just like tasty, sensual, sensational language. I loved it. I can't wait to read more Jeanette Winterson. I just bought Written on the Body, and I can't wait to read that. So that was came in the end of the year and really surprised me. Okay, next up, this is like top 3. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. I can't stop thinking about this book. It has embedded itself in my life. Meryl had also read it, so I feel like we've discussed this book a lot. This is her memoir, a work of auto theory, it says on the back, because she cites a lot of different thinkers and philosophers that you would know from gender studies, queer theory, feminist theory. She's citing a lot of people in this book, and you can see here every time there's a name on the side, she's pulling from someone else's work. So it's dense. For me, it's dense because she's working with a lot of big ideas and really some complicated ideas and complicated sentences. So just on like a pure reading level, it was very challenging for me. I think that it will be really beneficial to reread this book. But what is amazing about this book is her relationship with her partner, her son, and just being a mother, how she talks about family life, queer family life. There is a lot about birth. There's like her birth story is in here, and it is crazy, amazing. And this book also made me cry. And I just really related to a lot of it, like as a queer person, and like we have a dog now, so we are like building our own family, and it's just a lot of the themes that are in this book. Maggie Nelson is incredible. I would just love to meet her and to talk to her. There's just so much I could say, and I feel like now I can't articulate really well all that I felt about it. But it's such an important book that I feel like is really important to my life, and I want to reread it as much as possible. So that was that. In second place, another Maggie Nelson, which was Jane. This book also came towards the end of this year, and I read it in one sitting. This is about Maggie Nelson's aunt named Jane, who was murdered in the 70s. Is that right? Now I can't remember exactly. I'm really bad with dates and decades. Writes this kind of poetry book about her aunt and trying to discover who she was. So it does deal with the crime, but it mostly is a deep dive identity search about this woman that has such an imprint in her life, but someone that she didn't really know. It was just really beautiful, like the poems, how she tells the story of Jane, or how she inquires about Jane. Like, she doesn't have a lot of answers, and you get excerpts of Jane's own diary, so you get both of their voices. Sorry, this light tends to flicker. I hope you don't get sick. Kind of brings those two voices together, is very haunting, and it just really blew me away. And when I read it, I was like, oh, this is like my favorite book of the year. Like, it's number 2, but it's so good. Very slim also. I think you have to read it. And then we got to my favorite book of the year. Sorry, it's Dusty. It's a book I still feel like I don't hear anyone talking about, and I need you to read it because I have no one to talk to about it. Like, the occasional 2 people that have sent me messages about this book, I just am so excited that it landed in their hands, and also that I have someone to share it with. So I also gave this to a friend, and I wish I could hold it up because it's my favorite of the year. The Stillest Day by Josephine Hart. I got this book knowing nothing about it, nothing about the author. I was intrigued by the title, The Stillest Day, and I was intrigued by the cover in a used bookstore, so I bought it. And then it just changed me. It's like a weird, also kind of biblical story, it feels like, about this woman who lives with her mother, and at the time they're living in like this very small village where like everyone knows each other, everyone knows each other's business, and she's being kind of courted by this man, but he hasn't proposed to her. and she's kind of resistant anyway to the life of just being a wife. And then next door, this man moves in and with his pregnant wife, and she becomes just obsessed with him. The writing is so magnificent. It's really beautiful. It's so cinematic. I still think to this day, on a weekly basis, how, if I'm ever able to, I want to get the rights for this book and make it into a film, because it is like begging to be made visual, like visualized. She writes this like overwhelming obsession and sexual tension and attraction and eventual like madness is so well done and so creative. And this story also like takes a bunch of like hairpin turns and really surprised me. This is like definitely DWM woman losing her shit. It could be like a little bit the vibe of Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante, but really in a different situation and different writing, of course. It's wild. Like, yeah, there's death, there's like the plot is propulsive, although it's all about the sentences, all about incredible, incredible writing. I just loved that I had never heard about this book and I had no expectations, and I know that I don't like love this book because other people love this book. Like, oh, I'm gonna make my top 10 books the books that make me sound like a certain kind of reader, or that I see people that I like holding it in their hands, so I must like it if I'm gonna be a good reader. And I didn't have like any of those filters through this book. It was just a complete surprise, and I need you to read it. And that's all. That was really long, even though I feel like I talked high speed. Thank you for being a part of this booktube journey for me this month. I could make a whole other half-an-hour video about everything I feel about reading and being a part of this platform and finding real amazing friends in life from this community. And yeah, it was just a wild ride, and it was a crazy year, and I read a lot of amazing books, so thank you for being a part of that. And let's see what 2023 will bring in terms of reading. I think I'll make my goal 75, although I don't want to be scared of big books, like thick books, so I really don't mind if the numbers are lower. I just want to read more books that I will love. So, love you. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your favorite books of this year were, and if you've read any of these, and you better read my number one, and then send me a DM. If you hate it, it's also fine. Love you. Bye.